moments in life when the people you once trusted, the ones you held close, the ones you prayed for, the ones you thought would always be there, suddenly they shift. It can be subtle at first, the way their words lose warmth, the way their presence feels more like absence, the way your spirit senses the change before your mind can make sense of it. Then one day you wake up and realize they don't see you the way they used to. I value you the way you deserve, and it hurts. It cuts deep because you gave your all. You were loyal, you were consistent, you were present, you showed up even on days when you had nothing left. But now when you look around, the room is empty and the people who once celebrated you have moved on. I know what that feels like. I know the sting of being overlooked, the pain of being unappreciated, the weight of knowing you are no longer a priority in spaces where you once felt secure. But I also know this, when someone stops valuing you, your next move matters more than their choice. The way you respond in this season will either set you free or keep you bound. You don't get to control how they treat you, but you do get to control what you do next. And let me tell you what you're not going to do. You are not going to beg. You are not going to plead for someone to see your worth when you were created with value before they ever had an opinion about you. You are not going to chase someone who has made a decision to step back, because if they can walk away, then maybe, just maybe, their presence was tied to a version of you that no longer exists. You are not going to let rejection redefine your identity. Oh, I know rejection feels personal. I know it whispers lies late at night, making you question if you're enough, if you're worthy, if you'll ever be chosen again. But hear me. Rejection is not a reflection of your value, it's a revelation of their capacity. Some people only know how to love when it's convenient. Some only know how to support when it serves them. Some only know how to stand beside you as long as the road is smooth. But when someone stops valuing you, it doesn't change your worth, it only exposes theirs. You are not going to shrink yourself. This is not the time to dim your light just to make someone else comfortable. This is not the season to lower your standards just to be accepted. You have worked too hard, fought too many battles, and healed from too many wounds to start playing small now. Let them say you've changed. Let them accuse you of being different. You are not obligated to be the same person you were in a place that no longer fits you. You are not going to lose your integrity trying to prove a point. Sometimes when people dismiss you, there's a temptation to retaliate, to make them regret it, to show them what they lost. But let me tell you something. The best revenge is not in proving your worth to people who refuse to see it. The best revenge is in walking away with grace, holding your head high, and trusting that God has something greater ahead. You are not going to hold on to bitterness. Oh, I know it's tempting. I know the enemy wants you to rehearse every word, replay every moment, and nurse that wound until it becomes your identity. But bitterness will only keep you bound to what God is trying to free you from. You don't have to hate them to heal. You don't have to destroy them to be delivered. You don't have to carry the weight of resentment to walk into your promise. You are not going to close your heart to love. Just because they didn't value you doesn't mean no one will. Just because they couldn't see your worth doesn't mean you aren't priceless. Don't let one person's inability to love you right make you believe that love isn't real. It is real, it is pure, and it is still coming for you. You are not going to doubt the plan God has for you. This moment of rejection is not the end of your story. You serve a God who specializes in using the things meant to break you to build you instead. You serve a God who has a divine plan, and nothing, no rejection, no heartbreak, no betrayal can stop what he has set in motion. You are not going to let this break you. You may cry, but you won't quit. You may hurt, but you won't harden your heart. You may feel lost, but you will not lose yourself. This is not the end. This is the shift. This is the moment where God starts to separate the people who can go with you from the people who can't. This is the pruning before the promise. This is the letting go before the overflow. There comes a time in life when you have to make a decision. Will you live for the approval of people, or will you stand firm in the value that God has already placed within you? When someone stops valuing you, the worst thing you can do is beg them to see what they refuse to acknowledge. You were not created to be tolerated. You were created to be treasured. It's painful when someone you care about no longer appreciates you. Maybe it's a friend who used to call you first with their good news, but now barely responds to your messages. Maybe it's a relationship where love once felt secure, but now You're left wondering if you're the only one still trying. Maybe it's a job where your effort is overlooked, and no matter how hard you work, someone else always seems to get the recognition. Whatever it is, the temptation is always the same: to prove yourself, to work harder, to chase after their validation like your worth depends on it. But here's the truth: it doesn't. Your worth was never meant to be something you had to convince someone to see. To say, the moment you start begging for love, respect, or acknowledgement, you place your value in the hands of someone who has already shown you they don't know what to do with it. And that's dangerous, because if they couldn't see it when you gave them your best, they won't suddenly recognize it because you're pleading for their attention. Somewhere along the way, you have to realize that your presence is a gift. Your love is a privilege. Your loyalty is rare. When you start treating yourself like the prize you are, you stop negotiating with people who act like they're doing you a favor by staying in your life. I know what it feels like to want closure, to want an explanation, to want someone to say, I see you, I appreciate you, I was wrong. But some people will never give you that, and the longer you wait for it, the more you delay your healing. You don't need their words to confirm what God has already spoken over you. You don't need their validation to walk boldly in who you are. You don't need their approval to be great. The enemy will try to convince you that if someone stops valuing you, it means you aren't valuable, but that's a lie. A diamond doesn't stop being a diamond just because someone doesn't recognize its worth. A masterpiece doesn't lose its beauty just because someone walks past it without noticing. Your worth isn't up for debate. It's not something that increases when people cheer for you and decreases when they turn away. It is steady. It is God-given. It is unshakable. So what do you do when someone stops valuing you? You stop trying to convince them. You stop lowering your standards to accommodate their inability to love you correctly. You stop proving yourself to people who were never meant to handle the fullness of who you are. You let them go, not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom. Because you understand that when God removes someone, it's not rejection, it's protection. There is a peace that comes when you stop forcing what was never meant to fit. There is a strength that rises when you stop chasing people who have already. Rejection has a way of shaking your confidence, making you question your worth, and leaving you wondering if you'll ever be enough. When someone you care about turns away, when a door you prayed for stays shut, when an opportunity you work for slips through your fingers, the weight of that rejection can feel unbearable. But what if rejection isn't the end of the story? What if rejection is actually God's way of redirecting you towards something greater? It's easy to take rejection personally, to believe that if someone doesn't choose you, then maybe you weren't good enough. Maybe if you were smarter, they would have stayed. Maybe if you were more attractive, they would have loved you. Maybe if you worked harder, you would have been promoted. But rejection isn't a reflection of your worth, it's a revelation of their capacity. Some people only have the capacity to love at a certain level. Some doors can only open for a specific season. Some opportunities are never meant to be yours because they would keep you from the destiny God has planned for you. When someone rejects you, they are simply revealing that they do not have the ability to carry you into your next season. And if they don't have the ability to handle you, then why would you want to stay where you are not valued? It hurts when people walk away, but imagine the pain of staying in a place that was never meant to hold you. Imagine the weight of trying to prove your worth to someone who has already made up their mind. Imagine delaying the blessing that's ahead of you because you're too focused on what you lost. Rejection is not always a loss. Sometimes it's a rescue. Sometimes God has to allow people to leave so He can make room for the right ones to enter. Sometimes He has to let the door close so you don't settle for less than what He planned for you. Sometimes He has to redirect you because He knows that if you got what you wanted, it would have kept you from what you truly needed. Look back at your life and think about the things you once wanted so badly. The relationships you thought you couldn't live without, the jobs you thought would change everything, the friendships you thought would last forever. Now look at where you are. If some of those things had worked out, you wouldn't be growing the way you are now. If some of those people had stayed, you wouldn't have learned how to stay. If some of those opportunities had come through, you wouldn't have been available for the one that was actually meant for you. The truth is, every rejection has a purpose. It doesn't feel good in the moment. It stings, it's uncomfortable, it's confusing, But what you cannot see yet is that on the other side of rejection is something better, something that seems that values you, something that will require you to beg to be chosen. So don't let rejection make you bitter. Don't let it convince you that you're not worthy. Don't let it steal your confidence or make you question who you are. It's not a reflection of your value. It's a sign that there is more. There is better. There is something ahead of you that will remind you why that rejection had to happen. There is something powerful about knowing when you've outgrown a place, a relationship, a mindset, or a season. Growth is supposed to change you. It's supposed to stretch you. It's supposed to make you uncomfortable in places that once felt like home. But the problem is, too many people shrink themselves just to fit into spaces that no longer align with who they are becoming. They hold on to relationships that drain them, environments that limit them, and identities that no longer serve them all because they are afraid of what will happen if they step into the unknown. But you can't keep making yourself small just to make other people comfortable. You can't lower your standards just so you don't lose people who were never meant to go with you in the first place. You can't pretend to be the person you used to be when God is calling you to evolve into something greater. Growth requires movement. It requires elevation. It requires letting go of what no longer serves you so that you can make room for what's next. People will notice when you start changing. They will say things like, "You're different," as if it's a bad thing. They will accuse you of being distant, of thinking you're better, of moving in a way they don't understand. But the truth is, they don't have to understand. Not everyone will have the capacity to handle the version of you that is emerging. Not everyone will celebrate your growth because your evolution may expose their station. Some people only loved you when you were broken, insecure, and dependent on them. The moment you start walking in your confidence, in your calling, and in your purpose, they feel threatened because your growth reminds them of everything they haven't yet embraced in themselves. But that is not your problem to fix. Your only responsibility is to keep growing, to stop playing small, to stop apologizing for becoming everything you were meant to be. Staying in a place that no longer fits you will only strip your purpose. You were never meant to settle. You were never meant to be average. You were never meant to shrink yourself to fit inside a life that was never big enough to hold your destiny. There will be moments when it feels lonely. Growth will cost you people, habits, and even parts of your parts you thought you needed. But what you gain will always be greater than what you lose. You will gain peace. You will gain relationships that don't require you to dim your light in order to be accepted. You will gain the strength to walk boldly in the fullness of who you were created to be. So stop second-guessing yourself. Stop looking back at what's familiar just because stepping forward feels scary. Stop trying to fit into places that no longer match your capacity. Growth isn't always comfortable, but staying stuck is far worse. You have come too far to start shrinking now. Keep growing, keep evolving, and watch how God aligns everything in your life to fit the person you are becoming. Bitterness is one of the easiest things to hold on to and one of the hardest things to let go of. When people hurt you, when they overlook you, when they betray your trust, there is a part of you that wants to make sure they feel the pain they caused. You replay the situation in your mind over and over, trying to make sense of it, trying to understand why they did what they did. And the longer you hold on to it, the more that bitterness starts to take root. At first it feels justified. You tell yourself that you have a right to be angry, a right to hold on to resentment, a right to let that situation change how you see people. But what you don't realize is that the longer you carry bitterness, the more it poisons you, not them. Bitterness doesn't punish the person who hurt you, it punishes you, it weighs you down. It keeps you bound to a moment that was meant to pass. It steals your joy, your vision, and makes it impossible to fully embrace the future God has for you. Healing is not about saying what they did was okay. It's not about pretending the pain didn't happen. It's not about acting like the betrayal didn't cut deep. Healing is about refusing to let what happened control the rest of your life. It's about making the decision to move forward, even when you don't get the apology. It's about choosing peace over resentment because you understand that your destiny is too important to be delayed by bitterness. Some people will never say sorry. Some people will never acknowledge the damage they caused. Some people will move on like nothing happened while you're left trying to pick up the pieces. But waiting for them to make it right will only keep you stuck. You don't need their remorse to heal. You don't need their recognition to move on. Forgiveness is not about letting them off the hook, it's about setting yourself free. Letting go of bitterness doesn't mean you have to trust them again. It doesn't mean you have to let them back into your life. It simply means you refuse to let what they did define who you are. It means you are choosing to release the weight of that pain so that you can move forward in peace. You may think that holding on to bitterness gives you control, but in reality it controls you. It dictates how you see yourself. It shapes how you interact with others. It affects your ability to love freely, to trust again, to embrace the good things that are still ahead. But when you choose to release it, when you surrender the pain, when you let God handle what you cannot, that is when true freedom begins. The enemy wants you to stay bitter because he knows that as long as you do, you'll never fully step into the life God has for you. He knows that bitterness will block your blessings, that resentment will weigh down your spirit, that unforgiveness will keep you from experiencing the fullness of joy. But when you decide to let go, when you choose peace over pain, when you allow God to heal what they broke, you become unstoppable. So don't let what they did rob you of what God is trying to do. Don't let one moment of pain keep you from a lifetime of purpose. You have too much ahead of you to stay bound by what's behind you. Let go, move forward, and watch how peace replaces the bitterness that once tried to hold you back. There are moments in life when everything feels uncertain, when rejection, the disappointment, and the unexpected shifts make you wonder if things will ever come together. You thought you had it figured out. You made plans. You gave your best. You trusted the process. And still, the door closed up. The opportunity away. And now you're standing in the middle of a situation you never saw coming, trying to make sense of it all. It's easy to start doubting in these moments. Easy to wonder if God is even paying attention. Easy to believe that maybe you missed your chance, or maybe you weren't good enough. But just because it doesn't make sense now doesn't mean there isn't a purpose behind it. Just because you don't see the way forward doesn't mean God isn't already working things out behind the scenes. God's plan for your life is bigger than this moment, bigger than what you lost, bigger than what didn't go the way you expected. You may not understand why things happened the way they did, but that doesn't mean God has abandoned. His plans don't change just because your circumstances do. He knew this was coming. He saw the shift before you felt it. And even in the middle of the confusion, he is still in control. You have to trust that what looks like a setback is really a step. You have to believe that what feels like rejection is actually redirection. You have to understand that when God removes something, it's because he is making room for something greater. Just because you can't see the full picture doesn't mean it's not coming together. Think about all the times in your life when things didn't go the way you wanted, but later you realized it was for the best. The relationship you cried over, the job you thought you needed, the door you wish had opened now. Looking back, you see why it had to happen that way. You see how God was protecting you, guiding you, and preparing you. And if he did it before, he will do it again. The enemy wants you to believe that this is neither your story. He wants you to focus so much on what didn't work out that you lose sight of growth. He wants you to think that just because it hasn't happened yet, it never will. But the enemy is a liar. God's timing is perfect. And what he has for you is still on schedule. You may feel delayed, but you are not denied. You may feel forgotten, but God has not overlooked you. You may feel lost, but you are exactly where you need to be for him to do what only he can do. The plan hasn't changed just because the process looks different than you expected. So don't lose hope. Don't let this moment convince you that it's over. Don't allow temporary pain to make you doubt in the eternal promise. What's ahead is greater than what's behind. The doors that closed had to close so that the right ones could open. The people who left had to leave so that the right ones could enter. The things that didn't work out had to fail so that God's perfect pulled in on life. You don't have to see the full picture to trust the process. You don't have to have all the answers to keep moving forward. All you have to do is believe that God's plan is bigger than this moment and keep walking in faith. Because what he has for you is still coming. And when it arrives, you'll understand why this season had to happen exactly the way it did. There comes a time when you must decide whether you will let pain define you or if you will allow it to refine you. When someone stops valuing you, it's tempting to internalize their actions, to believe that something is wrong with you, to let their rejection shape the way you see yourself. But just because they couldn't see your worth doesn't mean you don't have it. Just because they walked away doesn't mean you weren't enough. Pain has a way of trying to attach itself to your identity. It whispers lies that tell you that you are unlovable, unwanted, or invisible. It makes you question if you will ever be appreciated, if you will ever be chosen, if you will ever experience the kind of love and respect you've always given to others. But here's the truth, pain is not your identity. What they did is not a reflection of who you are, it is a reflection of who they are. Their inability to value you has nothing to do with your worth and everything to do with their capacity. Some people only know how to love at a surface level. Some people only show up when it's convenient for them. Some people will take until there's nothing left, and then disappear when you need them most. And if you allow their actions to shape your self-worth, you will spend your life chasing validation, finding that isn't. We're never capable of giving it to you in the first place. You don't need anyone to affirm what God has already spoken over your life. You were created with value. You were designed with purpose. You were chosen before anyone had the chance to reject you. The fact that they didn't see your worth doesn't mean it wasn't there, it just means they weren't the right person to recognize it. But what happens next is up to you. You can either allow their rejection to break you, or you can use it to build yourself into something even stronger. You can let it make you bitter, or you can let it push you toward healing. You can sit in the pain, or you rise from it with a new understanding of who you are and what you deserve. Pain will try to convince you that you should close yourself this, you should harden your heart, that you should stop believing in love, trust, and connection. But the moment you allow pain to change who you are, you've given it more power than it deserves. You were not created to be bitter. You were not meant to carry the weight of someone else's inability to love you correctly. You were designed to shine, to walk in your worth, to live in the fullness of everything God has for you. Healing is not about forgetting what happened, it's about choosing not to let it control you. It's about deciding that you will not shrink yourself down just because someone else couldn't handle your life. It's about understanding that rejection is often God's way of making room for something better. It's about learning to trust again. Not because everyone deserves your trust, but because you deserve to live without the burden of bitterness. So allow yourself to heal. Give yourself permission to move forward. Don't let what they did convince you that you are anything less than extraordinary. Your worth is not up for debate. The right people will see it. The right opportunities will recognize it. The right things will remind you why everything had to happen exactly the way it did. Life has a way of teaching us who truly values us and who was only there for convenience. When someone stops valuing you, it's not your job to convince them of your worth. It's not your responsibility to shrink yourself, to hold on to bitterness, or to stay stuck in a place where you are no longer appreciated. Instead, you must recognize that rejection is often God's redirection, that your value does not decrease because someone failed to see it, and that every loss is making space for something greater. You are not meant to beg for love, to settle in places you've outgrown, or to let pain define you. You are meant to rise, to evolve, to heal, and to trust that what is ahead is far greater than what was left behind. The moment you stop chasing those who walked away, the moment you release bitterness and step into peace, the moment you embrace the truth that God's plan is bigger than rejection, that is the moment you step into your true power. So let go of what no longer serves you. Stand firm in who you are. Trust everything happening now is working for your good. And when doubt tries to creep in, remind yourself, I am worthy. I am chosen. I am enough. So stand up. Wipe your tears. Stitch your crown. You are still chosen. You are still worthy. You are still powerful. Let them go and watch how God moves